Okay, so this week is going to be the last week, basically. I mean, not last week of the semester, but I'm talking about the last week regarding computer-assisted language learning and teaching that ends up or somewhat wraps up where we have began and where we are ending up now. So if you kind of can remember what we started off with way before in time around like 1960s and 70s, where we started to understand how people learned languages. And we started off with going through the route of, let's say, the history of language learning, the human learning in general, and then moved beyond to learn more specifically about different contexts. So it went into more of a detailed understanding into the social cultural theory and also looking at the individual differences, the individual interests, personalization, and all of those came along in early to I think the 20s. And now we are going to round up or wrap up somewhat by reflecting on what we have learned so far and also examining where we are headed towards. I think that this is more of the important question that we should probably try to answer at this point. Why are we or where are we going? So where are we heading and which way seems to be the right way? Or, I mean, I don't think there is a right or wrong ways to start off with, but at least give us an opportunity to reflect on what's going to happen and how we are going to prepare ourselves for it too. So the last topic that we are going to deal with is something called computer assisted language learning and teaching. An interesting thing that I want to, before even I mention more detail into about this topic, is that language learning is usually taught by language teachers, right? And these language teachers have majors usually in linguistics or literature, so language related subjects. So they're very far, I would say that they are very distant from computers or technology. And that I am an example of that too. You might have seen me having trouble even turning this desktop on. And what that, or when I use Zoom, for example, I remember that one instance, like when I first had to use Zoom, I sent students into small breakout rooms. And afterwards, when I thought that, okay, so now I'm going to end the breakout session, I kicked everyone out of the session. Like, so that's how I am not familiar with technology. And I think that will be the case for a lot of language teachers. So when computer entered our world, computer was mainly used as complementary tool and not even I don't think a lot of people still use computers until I think probably Zoom was one like the COVID. Due to COVID, a lot of teachers had to learn how to use these technology. So, and then in 2023, as we can all imagine, ChatGPT and AI started to come into our life, and that dramatically again changed the atmosphere of language learning and teaching. Um, just to give an example, there is in fact a journal called CALL, like Computer Assisted Language Learning. So this is an international journal. This is a very reputable journal. And this journal, if you look at the index of the ranking of the journal, it kind of skyrocketed after COVID and also after AI. So you can understand that people's attention to computer or computer assisted learning or technology assisted learning has eventually changed very much the landscape of language learning and teaching. So that was just one of my reflection on computers in language teaching in general. In addition to that, when I came, so I used to teach back in Hong Kong. So I used to teach at a university in Hong Kong. And afterwards, I came to KAIST in 2020. So when I first joined 2020, KAIST in 2020, I got also to be a part of the School of Computing as a joint professor there. And one professor who has recently retired, in fact, when we were having a meeting, he asked me a very interesting question. He said, "So what could I do for you? So what could I do for language teachers? Like what could I do for language teaching in general?" That was very, I think it was a very fresh question to me because a lot of the times these technologies seems to be developed first and then offered to language teachers and say like, so see how you can use it, right? Rather than starting off with the needs of the language learner or the needs of the language teachers and then go through the development process. So to me, what I was able to get from that experience was that when we are developing something, like even computers or technology, I think the best way to, or the most effective way to go about it is first to find out about what is needed, what is the gap, right? What is going to be needed in the future or the present. So those were some of my own experiences, and also I have a lot of stories to tell, especially related to AI. But I think I will unfold some of those later on. So we are going to start off with a small discussion. So first of all, within your groups, try to discuss if you think that computer-assisted language learning is primarily about technology or you think it's about pedagogy. Pedagogy meaning language teaching. And also think about who designs these language learning technologies. You can try to answer by giving examples or your own experiences and try to start or warm up your thoughts related to these topics. So try to get into pairs or a group of 30 and start discussion. So any thoughts regarding any of the questions that you want to talk about? These questions seem very broad and intention is to be broad so that you can make connections as much as you can. Try to answer the questions differently, look at it in a different perspective. Any comments?
I think CALL is about pedagogy because I think there's nothing new about learning language, even though we use the computer. I mean, it's not that put the computer inside our head and computer aid or automate how we learn. I think it's about the computer is just a tool to help our learning English.
So you think regarding the first question about call, you think that the technology is still, so you think call is more about pedagogy rather than technology. Okay, interesting approach. Good. I mean, we can, by the way, for the first question, there's no answer. Okay. So you can just interpret the way that you want. Okay. When we talk about, I mean, from the word call, it has both the word computer and language learning. So it means that it's actually both. But it seems like which one are we going to pay more attention to? So as Gina just mentioned, it seems like the ground, however, the baseline should be related to pedagogy. If not, that it's not going to be about language learning anymore, but about computer, right? Or just simply technology. Interesting approach. Any other thoughts? You might have thought it the other way around though, too, right? Because since computer assisted language learning seems to refer to the use of computer while you are doing the language learning, therefore it could be also interpreted as what kind of technology allows for what, right? So depending on what tools that you use, you might be able to foster your different types of skills. Let's say, for example, if you use tool A, it might help you develop your writing tool. It's like a writing platform. If you're using like a speaking platform, it would provide you with not writing skills, but more geared towards developing your speaking skills. So it would be interpreted differently. I think when we talk about language learning technologies, it is very broad. I think Theo also mentioned about how when we talk about language learning technology, there might be technologies that were invented for other purposes, but you can use it for language learning purposes. This is not only limited to language learning per se, but it could include all these other modes that we use that provide us with a different use depending on who the users are. So you can use it for different purposes. Even like nowadays, ChatGPT, students might use it in different ways. You can use it for learning. You can use it for different. One example that I just remembered was that my husband, he's also not familiar with AI, and one day he was asking me about, I think it was perplexity, and the use of perplexity, and so I logged into his, and he was like asking me, how do you use this? And you know how they have threads on the left-hand side, which shows you what you asked before? And then I could see something like, which says, write me a letter to my wife, who I've been married for 6 years. I was like, what? What? And by the way, like a couple of days before, it was their wedding anniversary, and I got his letter, right? And it was very touching. So I was like, and he was like, oh, he panicked, and then he started to delete it. And I was like, no, 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 I really want to see if the touching part, like where I thought was really sweet, was from him or was from perplexity. Anyways, you can see how people use it differently, right? Same goes with language learning technologies. Anyway, so now he knows not to use it. I'm still wondering if it was him or perplexity that I fell in love with. But anyways. Okay, so what we are going to do is we're going to pretty much reflect on what we've learned so far, making connections to computer-assisted language learning. So we talked about all these behaviorism and also communicative competence, and reflecting back on that. For example, we have something called behavioristic call, so which refers to the how this idea was influenced by behaviorist learning theory, emphasizing repetition and habit formation. So you might be able to find still in computer-assisted language learning that there are a lot of repetition, drills or grammar practice, immediate correction, limited authentic communication. The AI digital textbooks that a lot of publishing houses created were similar to this. What ended up happening was we had to create like 1,000 questions for the whole book so that when students answer the question and they will be guided to the next question depending on whether they got the answer correct or wrong, and repeat and repeat and drilling. So it's similar to that in terms of the behavioristic call. If you can also think about any of the technology that you have experienced, try to think about which one your experience seems to be relevant to. That would be quite useful here too. The next one, communicative call, emphasize the meaningful communication. We talked about this idea before, right? Meaningful communication and also fluency was the main idea related to the communicative competence rather than isolated grammar practice. So as opposed to behavioristic call, the communicative call focuses on the learner-centered communication, the fluency and authentic language use. So it would have a lot of simulation where you use the language, whether in spoken discourses or in written ones, including the email exchanges or the discussion forums. The integrative call refers to the integration of multimedia and also the internet technologies into language learning. I think a lot of you might have something related to. The features include multimodal learning, including the multimodal refers to a lot of different modes, including language, the sound, the visual image, all these all coming in together. The internet integration and also collaborative learning with another one. The online communication and virtual exchange would be something called used to be for integrated call. The examples include YouTube, blogs, or virtual exchange. So, for example, using Zoom, for instance, or using YouTube for communication where you use the videos, the sound, and a lot of images all together, those would be considered to be the integrated call. The intelligent call, or more of an AI-mediated call nowadays, refers to the AI-supported adaptive systems capable of personalization, personalized interaction and feedback. The keyword personalization is something that comes up in intelligent or AI-mediated call that you would find it very much used nowadays. So personalization, adaptive feedback, conversational AI, generative interaction is all the keywords that are connected to AI mediated call. However, I want you to start thinking about personalization and how we are going to use personalization in language learning. This was a very critical question that I myself had, because we often say that personalization is supposed to be good, right? People say that it will match up to the individual's interest and you create something that is suitable for individual students. So it sounds very ideal and somewhat very nice, right? However, at the same time, you have to wonder, are we going to only feed students with something that they like? This was the question that I myself had as a language instructor, for instance, or a general instructor. For instance, like, let's say a kid likes 탕후루, okay? And do you think that, so because the kid likes 탕후루, would the parents give 탕후루 to the kid for every single meal? Not really. We have to balance it out. It's similar with the learning in general too. Are we going to only provide students? I think a lot of you would like, I don't know, like technology, not like language, most of you. But what that tells us is, are we going to only make the students imbalanced on purpose? So, however, at the same time, so then some of the ways to tackle these questions might be to balance it out and also to measure where the students are at using the technology that's available. So ChatGPT or AI speech partners would be some of the examples related to the intelligent call or an AI mediated call that we see nowadays. So this was some of the history related to call, and more specifically related to what we have so far talked about related to second language acquisition theories. What we can find is, first of all, the interaction hypothesis, which argues that language learning develops through meaningful interaction and negotiation of meaning. We talked about this beforehand. So when learners encounter communication difficulties, interaction or modifications such as clarification requests or repetition, that these were some of the things that we saw last week about error types or feedback. These may help the comprehension and also acquisition. So in call environments, AI chatbots and collaborative platforms can create opportunities for learners to engage in interaction and receive immediate responses. And in this sense, Long also emphasized that interaction supports access to comprehensible input and facilitates language development. So what this suggests is interaction essentially is going to be helpful for language learners if it provides meaningful interaction and also negotiation of meaning. So that is crucial. So when you read this, you might also start to think about, does the AI platforms that I currently use, in fact, provide me with feedback that seems to be needed for development? Sometimes you might find that, I don't know if this is me, but I think sometimes that the only experience that I recently had with ChatGPT, but they are very nice. So what that means is that you have to, so however, in language learning to occur, you can't really say that all the acceptance of what you say might not provide you with any of the explicit feedback unless you request for it. So those are some of the concerns that arises from the use of the current systems that we have. So some of the applications and call, as you can find, would be included in here. The other hypothesis that we can make connection to is also something called the Swain's output hypothesis, which proposes that producing language is an important part of second language development, which means that there needs to be an output, right? So when learners attempt to express meanings, they might notice gaps in their linguistic knowledge and become more aware of grammar, vocabulary, or pronunciation issues. But unless you speak it out or you produce the language, you won't be able to necessarily find where you're missing or what you need. So AI-mediated speaking and writing system can encourage learners to produce pushed output through conversation, feedback, and also revision activities. But these needs to be somewhat tailored for these purposes. These interactions might support noticing, reformulation, and meta-linguistic reflection. So what I've written here is that they might have the potential to do it. I'm not trying to say that they already do it. Okay, so they might still be missing these parts, and this is something that we are going to do later on in our activity, where you might in fact examine how the current or the ones that you are using, for instance, is missing or highlighting or emphasizing. So we'd be able to look at the strengths and limitations against some of these hypotheses. So as you can tell that the output hypothesis could refer to both the speaking and also writing, where you're producing the language rather than the receptive skills like listening and also reading. Moving on to social cultural theory, now views language learning as a socially mediated process. You guys remember the ZPD and also Vygotsky. This is where it comes up. That suggests that learners can achieve higher levels of performance when supported through scaffolding. Scaffolding is another key term that comes up in Vygotsky's terms. And in call environments, again, AI systems might function as a mediational tools by providing prompts, corrective feedback, and also guided interaction. So guiding the learners to get better. This raises an important question about whether AI can provide forms of scaffolding traditionally associated with human teachers or peers. This is still being tested. All these ideas that I have written down currently is something that the researchers are doing as we say. So these are ongoing investigation that a lot of people are trying to examine, because as you can all imagine that it has only been 3 years. So a lot of people are trying to compare whether AI can do something similar to what human instructors have done or not. So the qualifications would include things like AI as a scaffold, and because it encourages scaffolding, the collaborative digital learning, is it really collaborative? And also the guidance from the AI, what's the quality like? And also, does it help the learners grow? So some of the tools that are used in evaluating these call tools involve examining both the pedagogical and technological dimensions. This brings us back to the first slide where we did the discussion when I asked you, do you think call is pedagogy or do you think it's more about technology? But evaluating them, we have to consider both now. So we have to both consider the technological use, thinking about the UX, but at the same time, you have to also consider the pedagogical background. Is it strong enough? So researchers often consider whether a system promotes meaningful communication, learner engagement, interaction quality, and accessibility. All these, something that we just looked at. And also some of the critical evaluation also requires examining issues like linguistic representation, inclusivity, AI transparency, and also learner privacy. So these are all the additional issues that seems to be something that a lot of people are paying attention to, especially nowadays. So Sheffield argues that call evaluation should be grounded in theories of language learning and pedagogical effectiveness. So if you take a look at the bottom, there are some examples of pedagogical factors and technological factors, including things like language learning effectiveness, communicative authenticity, interaction quality, learner engagement are just some examples related to the pedagogical factors. The technological factors include things like usability and interface design, accessibility, adaptability, and AI transparency. Again, some of the examples that I have. Great. So what we are going to do so I try to leave as much time as possible. So what we are going to do now is an activity. So as a group, what you're going to do is you can choose 1 or 2 platforms, like the call use technologies. So things like Duolingo or ChatGPT or any other language learning technologies that you think people use or you use yourself. Okay, so try to choose one, first of all, and then try to carefully observe how the system teaches response, and also structures learner interaction. Try to organize them and make notes. While exploring the tool, pay attention to the types of activities provided, the role of feedback that we talked about a week ago, the opportunities for communication. So how much the turn taking, we talked about the turns, remember? And the learner engagement strategy, what are some of the strategies that this platform is using to get the learners engaged? And personalization or any of the examples of adaptation. Multimodal features, do you see any of the colors or characters or anything that pops up? Assumptions about the correct language use. This is a very critical question. What seems to be the legitimate or the correct version of the language? So that's another one. Then afterwards, discuss the strengths and limitations of the platform using the following, the evaluation framework. So these are the worksheets that you can use if you can't really start off with some of these ideas. So for example, you can answer the question, does the tool promote meaningful language learning? Does it support communicative competence or mainly repetitive practice? Or does it encourage interaction, reflection, or negotiation of meaning? What does it do? Interaction quality, you can also take a look at those. And so until here, adaptation. And you can also examine against the AI transparency, looking into the technological factors too. So you can go back and forth between the questions and also the topics written over here and try to really find out and investigate or analyze in a very detailed way of the platform that you think is important or is something that you want to look at. So about 20 minutes, try to get into groups and we'll talk about your analysis afterward. Okay, so let's try to share what each group have found. It seems like you have a lot of illegal users in that, or it's because I put that as an example. And also some people looked at Gemini or also ChatGPT. So let's talk about those. Duolingo. First, let's talk about Duolingo. What do you guys think about the features? How would you evaluate the quality of this tool?
It's too repetitive.
Repetitive. So it seems to use the behaviorist call that we looked at. There's a lot of drilling, repetition, right? Okay. Frankly, I haven't used Duolingo, but interestingly, so I asked two groups to look into who created or who established Duolingo. And do you guys remember it was two guys, right? Two guys with background in
Computer science.
computer science. So going back to the first slide, the first discussion that we talked about, this particular language learning tool seems to be developed from an engineering point of view. However, an interesting thing that I found out was that Duolingo is very big in the States, and I think they want to get that. I don't know. This is just my impression, but because they don't have background in education, I think they want to claim their legitimate position in the field of education. That I actually found that Duolingo is sponsoring, or last year there's a huge, no, last year or the year before, there's a big conference in America, which is called American Association of American Applied Linguistics. So it's a very big conference that has a lot of applied linguistics in, and Duolingo had its own special colloquium. So, which means that they want to enter the field of education and saying that, oh, we are going to claim that we are an educational technology and it has that learner effectiveness, the pedagogical factors, and trying to investigate the effectiveness. So it's somewhat starting from the other way. I mean, it feels a little bit awkward, but it's like development of technology first, and then they're claiming the effectiveness later. Anyway, so that's what's happening. So anything related to Duolingo, the strengths and limitations that you have noticed, or any characteristics?
So Duolingo is free. So
Is it?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
And it lacks any personalization content. It offers same content for all users.
So there's no personalization, or it does not really change depending on your preferences. No. Okay. So where does AI come in Duolingo?
I think just multimodal features, the characters, they're not really AI, they're just pre-programmed. There's no AI.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
But recently I saw a new feature powered by AI. Like they offers video chat with
Oh
the
my God.
characters.
Oh,
But you have to pay.
you have to pay for that. Oh, okay. So the use of AI is something that you have to pay additional.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, it makes sense because Duolingo was there before even AI
Yeah.
entered, I feel. So it
Yeah.
seems like somewhat natural that it started off with something that we are somewhat familiar with, and nowadays they are incorporating some of the features using AI. Okay. Anything else that you notice? Yeah. Right.
I think Duolingo like combined the words from behaviorist call and communicative call because it implements just repetitive drills, but it still doesn't explain grammar well.
Oh,
Very little emphasis, like in the lesson itself, there is no grammar explanation. You should go to a different part in the app to read on your own about grammar. They're not teaching it to you basically. But then you cannot say that they're focusing on authentic communication because I mean, unless you pay for the to chat with the icon, it's just they're only can correct your pronunciation.
okay. So only check your pronunciation,
Yes.
but not really an authentic
Yes, yes.
communication. The same, I think. Even with AI, because if you're talking with a character, how much can you call it authentic?
I mean, it can still be a communication, but then you just in the where they check your pronunciation, you just say one sentence that's like without context, without meaning. It's not a dialogue format, not an email format, just very random sentence.
Just sentences.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Do you think since you guys are all using it, it still seems like despite the fact that it's free, what other features do you think is grasping people to join?
They're really good at marketing, viral marketing.
Yes.
Yeah.
The character of Duo is very famous in Instagram, I guess.
They had their own Instagram page. And
And the character is supposed to be cute.
It is a green ball, but it behaves kind of very like crazy.
Then that's the point.
Yeah.
Okay.
People find it funny and I want to take this course and they enter and they download something like this.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not like ororo.
And then
Yeah,
Okay, okay.
many different.
Okay, so it's different in terms of how the character. So I know one thing that I saw that the app changes. If you don't visit it often enough, it gets angry or something. So I think that part is related to the engagement in a way. But then when you think about the engagement level, it's also looked into. If you look at the layers of engagement, it might draw people's attention and click the app. But then in order to continue learning, that's another different type of engagement, right? And sometimes people might, I think one group talked about how you might go in for the sake of attendance check,
Yes.
right? Rather than really the urge to learn. So people might, in fact, the purpose of learning or purpose of using that technology might in fact change. Let's talk about other AI apps or AI platforms like ChatGPT or Gemini. What do you guys think? This group over here had a really interesting discovery when you asked, has anyone used both Gemini and ChatGPT before? Okay. So to use it for like conversational partners, this group entered, how are you for both? What was the response that you get?
I'm doing good. How are you?
So that was from ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And Gemini said,
I'm fully functioning. How can I help you?
yeah, so fully functioning. How many of you would, let's say, okay, how are you doing? Like, I'm fully functioning today. Like, I'll be like, okay, Theo, I'm gonna walk away now. It's like positioning, Gemini is positioning itself as a tool, right? So you can find that these tools might in fact present themselves as differently depending on the purpose of it. So I think there seems to be a stark difference between that. But in addition to that, if you are focusing on language learning now, do you think which one would work better? Or do you think they would both work better or for different strengths and weaknesses?
Does ChatGPT have live mode?
What do you mean life mode? Like calling?
like talking on the phone.
I think it should have, but I never tried to do it.
Chuan, do you want to add something? Oh, I thought, if you try, 'cause sometimes there is the voice where you can talk with AI, not only specifically to ChatGPT, but Whisper, I think, is also something that we use to get different type of accents in speaking language. And what we can find is, however, that there is that delay in time where it's using the technology, the speech to text and text to speech. So when you speak, then it will turn into text so that AI would understand and comment back and then be spoken. So there is that lapse in time where it feels very not that authentic, right? Because we don't really have like a pause. I'd be like, "Weird, how are you doing?" I'm fine, thank you. Not really like that, right? Even like a really slight pause might feel very awkward because a lot of the times we are often overlapping our talks. So it's already time to go, but we are going to continue on with these technologies and with this discussion next class. So that's it. And if you have any questions regarding anything that we talked about today or what you'd like to talk about, please say and ask me before you leave. Otherwise,